Hey guys, sorry, I'm just so tuckered out and I only have very little time to play some games. Life has been busy nowadays, so I tend to have 1 hour of game time and I'd like to keep my options open. Still, I made it a personal goal to try to finish Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I am on track to finishing the final chapter, so let's go ahead and complete that main story.
3 days later.
Still on track here, 25% of the way there. Played some other games in between, but still doing good.
2 weeks later.
I just passed the halfway mark in the final chapter. If I keep it up at this pace, I might just be done in a few days. Played even more games, life decided to be hard, but I am getting this done.
So much later that the old mayor left for vacation a week ago and they had to quickly find the replacement.
Alright, that's Xenoblade Chronicles 3 in the books in terms of the main story. Now, on to the next game. I swear, I haven't been buying much recently.
Oh my god, so many games that have played so little time! If you're invested in any entertainment medium whatsoever, there is a good chance you have a lineup to go through. There is so many books to read, so many TV shows and anime to watch, and so many video games to play. How can you possibly get through them all, especially if you missed out on their original release? It can be a Herculean task to even get through one such set in each medium. If you want to read the entire Lord of the Rings books, watch the entirety of Naruto, or play through all the Kingdom Hearts games, better get your affairs in order because you're in it for the long haul. But time waits for no one. New things get released on a regular basis, and something might pique your interest and you want to invest your time in it. Whether it's on the day of release or later down the road, it garnered your interest enough that you want to get it. So you do just that. And then it happens again with another game. And yet again with another game. And another. 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 And eventually, it'll get to the point where you have an overwhelming amount of entertainment to go through, all the while you're in the middle of something else. This is known as a backlog, a large accumulation of matters, especially incomplete ones that need to be dealt with. We've all had something like it, it's just that dealing with it can be a struggle. And no group of people deals with a backlog more than gamers. There is so many games out there for everyone and so little time to do that I'd argue it'd be impossible for a single person to experience it all. Now technically if you're currently playing through one game, then you've got a backlog. Completing a single game is an ongoing commitment. Completing tens or hundreds of games, all of a sudden there goes your social life. And let's be real, if you do not have some sort of backlog on something, even outside of video games, are you even human? Now, if you were a kid, having a large game backlog is unlikely. Unless you're born in the right circumstances, your parents might not be willing to get you a new game in such a short period of time as the last, and you basically have all the time in the world to complete that new game you got. It's gonna be the only game you're going to have for a long time, so there goes your game time right there. Unless you're one of those kids whose parents wouldn't allow them to play video games during school days. So logically, that means adulthood means more freedom, which means more money to get your own games and more time to play games, right? You'd think that, but then you now have to deal with the dreaded thing known as responsibilities. Naturally, those are thrust upon you as you get older, and you start to feel the responsibilities pile up as a teenager, but adulthood is when those responsibilities really kick into high gear. Nobody's gonna bail you out on that one, so unless you know how to manage yourself, welcome to Backlog City. The gaming backlog is something every gamer has to deal with at some point, even if they aren't part of the game collecting scene. There's a game out there for everyone, and when there are multiple games that fit one's taste, it's easy to buy into fulfilling it as much as possible. I'm no different. My own tastes pretty much prompt me to only buy games I'm really interested in playing because something in it clicked. But sometimes that sale comes up on a game that I might be interested in, and I would think, well, if it's on sale, I might as well. Not only that, recently I have been finding myself expanding my horizons of experiences I wouldn't think of having, which would only compound the backlog. I'm telling you, it's just a never-ending struggle. So how does one go about building a game backlog? It's very simple. Just get games, and if you're really daring, get multiple games in such a short amount of time. There's a reason I said that adults are more likely to have a backlog, as they most likely have the money to do just that. But just because you likely have a different financial situation doesn't mean you're immune to backlog buildup. Not even the most frugal spenders are safe, as sales exist, and when there's a sale, there is bound to be games with prices you wouldn't even dream of. You might not want to play the game yet, but if it's at a really good price, you might as well take advantage of it in case that you decide that one day you will play the game in question. Those darn Steam sales do PC gamers numbers for a reason. For comparison, I got the Resident Evil 2 remake for $9.99 during the Steam sale, while a physical copy on the PS4 last I checked goes for $22 physically on Amazon. You see why PC gamers are great at saving? Opportunities like that don't appear very often, after all. You will absolutely regret it if you don't take advantage of the sale.
Here is my copy of Ghost of Tsushima that I got at a garage sale for $1 in summer 2022, and now, here is me not playing it.
And that's not getting into people who get their games through dubious means and involve them not spending any money at all. Listen, I'm fine with people doing anything they can to be able to play a game they really want to play. within reason. But if you're a hater of all things backlog, getting games this way just leaves you being at high risk of building a backlog very quickly while spending nothing at all. I'm telling you, no matter how you get your games, you're at a risk of building a gaming backlog that will get out of control quickly.
It's fine to admit that you're a pirate. We're all humans at the end of the day.
No matter what situation you're in, if you're getting games and not beating them in a timely manner, eventually you reach a point where you lose track of the games that you have yet to beat. I can imagine several questions going on in one's head when they see the backlog. How did it get this way? Who or what is the blame for this? Is this backlog my fault? How am I going to tackle all this now? Again, this is a struggle we all go through.
So you got a backlog of games. Not the end of the world, but maybe the end of your sanity. But the kinds of games that entail the backlog come in different categories, all of which contribute in some way to the backlog.
First off, we have the just bought but haven't touched games. As the category title suggests, these are the games that you have bought at some point but for some reason left them alone for a long time. This is especially true if you bought the game on sale, because why not? Now, whether or not you'll actually get to play them is entirely up to you. Just bear in mind this. You did make the choice to buy the game to begin with, so that means you did want the game for some reason, enough that you are compelled to buy the game at that very moment. It's just that something is getting in the way of getting started on that new game you bought. And as time goes on, your new game is just sitting there, not being played despite you paying money for the right to do that. Your new game could still be in the shrink wrap for all I know. I have The Last of Us Part 2 still in the shrink wrap. I swear I will get to this eventually. Your Steam library could have a bunch of games that you haven't even loaded up, likely due to their famous sales. And if that game gets any price drops since you have bought it, that's what you get for not being patient enough. Any way you slice it, you're not making use of the games you bought. It makes me ask, what are you even doing buying these games if you're not going to play them on the very first opportunity that you have?
I just really love that new game smell.
Next up, we have the played for a bit then put down games, the most common type of backlog games out there. These are the games that you spend some time on, only to then put them down and probably not touch them for a long time for one reason or another. These are just like the games that you buy and never play immediately, but the difference here is that you did actually play them at all, which is why they're later set aside after some time after playing. Will you pick them up again? That's up to you to decide. These type of backlog games tend to have one of two different fates. You'll pick it back up after some time, or you'll put it down for good and never go back to them. We all get busy existing, so it might be a really long time if you decide to pick it back up at all. And when that day comes, you're likely going to need some time to get reacquainted with the game, both the controls and the story. Sometimes getting yourself back up to speed is quick and you'll continue on like normal. Other times, you're going to need to do some extensive searching to figure things out. You're likely going to need some sort of guide to get your bearings straight, otherwise you're on your own. On the other hand, if you decide to never pick up the game again, that technically removes it from the backlog somehow. Good job shrinking it if this is the case. So what exactly prompted this sudden removal from the backlog without beating it? Sometimes something outside the game itself prompted this decision. Either you legitimately forgot about the game, or more likely, something pretty much forcing that position. Say you somehow lost your copy, or you have to sell it to continue existing, and buying it again isn't financially feasible at the time. Those are valid reasons you'll never pick up a game again. But most of the time, the games you put down for good become that because it didn't jive with you or it's just plain bad. Either way, spending any more time with it is a question of willpower. Could the good stuff happen after the point you put it down for good? I can't answer that certainly, because if you don't have the willpower to go through something that doesn't jive with you, why force yourself to continue the miserable journey? If you didn't enjoy it then, you're probably not going to enjoy it later down the road. It's better that you just walk away from the experience that you know it's not going to give you enjoyment.
Unless you really enjoy that stuff, which means that you're a masochist or you hate yourself.
These next two categories are games that don't necessarily have to go through a backlog for one reason or another, but are contributors nonetheless, as they can compound to it even if you didn't buy a new game. Sure, you can pop these in and play for a bit, and technically you didn't add to the backlog at all, but that quick time playing for the hell of it could have been used for tackling the backlog even for a little bit. Which brings us to our third category, the never-ending games. Usually being multiplayer games, these games don't really have an end because the gameplay loop is just so damn addictive. When selecting a game to play, these games tend to be the ones I pick up most for those reasons. These are usually fighting games, online shooters, or even life simulator games. Sure, they may have a campaign that you can go through, but by completing that, you're only scratching the surface on what the game has to offer. This is especially true if it's heavily multiplayer focused. You'd be spending a lot of that time playing with friends, practicing for a competition, or just want the different feeling of kicking butt in a game that a single-player campaign can't offer. Hell, even grinding to score some content can be a reason why you spend so much time on that multiplayer game. And that's not getting into the non-competitive games, where you can just get creative, play God, or just chill. There are many reasons these type of games continue to be played, even if one has a backlog of other games. You may have very little reason to play them any longer, even after unlocking everything, but if you like it so much, who gives a shit at that point? If there's one game I blame for my current backlog woes, it's Splatoon 3. The gameplay is just so addicting that I need that catalog filled out. I can't put it down, and that can cause problems on the backlog side of things. When was the last time I touched Tears of the Kingdom again?
Let's see, since June.
The fourth and final category rings especially true for building a backlog without ever buying a new game: the replays. Ever love a game so much that you just want to play it all over again? Congratulations! You're replaying the game, and as a result, you put it back into the backlog. To be fair, if a game has a strong replay value, I don't blame you for replaying a game. I can think of a few reasons why you want to replay a game that you have already beaten. 1. They want to play the game again, this time armed with the knowledge so they could be able to play it differently than they did the first time. The first playthrough was learning the ropes on how the game works, so the second playthrough, theoretically, should be a bit quicker due to game knowledge. Your first Pikmin 4 playthrough is just you learning the ropes, so your second playthrough should be smooth with improved dandori, right? 2. They haven't played the game in a really long time and are experiencing it all over again, possibly recreating that first playthrough feeling. Games that you really love are the most magical in one's first playthrough, to the point where it would probably require months of not playing it for a long time to have something close to that feeling again. Or 3. A game you have played before has been re-released in some way, whether it's remastered, remade, or just straight up ported. Regardless of how the re-release came about, it may have given you an excuse to play it again, usually for the first 2 reasons. Okay, some people do treat remakes as if they're a new game since there may be changes from the original, but the point still stands. No matter what your motive is into replaying a game, that does mean that you have to make the decision to add the game back into the backlog just for that replayability. No one will blame you for replaying a game you love, but tread carefully if you're still on the first playthrough of other games.
For Metroid Prime Remastered, I will do anything.
And there's the 4 types of games your backlog can contain. And with that knowledge, now's the part where one would have to figure out how to tackle it. As I said before, time is of the essence, so you're gonna need to figure out how much time you'll need to beat one game in particular. Which is why HowLongToBeat.com is probably gonna be your guide to start planning. This website gives you the average hours one would take to complete the game in some way, whether it's for the main story or 100% completion. They have the hours for whatever situation you find yourself in. And looking through the website, you'll start to see patterns, whether it's the genre or the time it came out. Simpler games like platformers and action games don't have a large amount of hours, so you'll get through those type of games relatively quickly. But then we get into games like RPGs and open world games, and that's when you have to get your affairs in order. Speaking from experience here, RPG fans are the people most likely to have a large backlog, and it's pretty easy to see why. Just looking up the hours to complete just the main story of a single RPG is gonna strike fear in one's heart, even if you do speedrun through it. Games these days are also getting longer due to the amount of content that they tend to have or the amount of learning of the game that you have to do. Cutscenes are the worst in padding out game time too, as that's time you could be doing literally anything else, including playing the game. Something tells me this is contributing to the large amount of hours to beat the game. Google claims that the average person has about 4 to 6 hours of free time per day, which might sound like playing time to tackle the backlog, but unless you really have nothing else to do, doing the same activity for 4 to 6 hours per day might wear at you at some point. Now that you know how to get an idea of the scope of what you're taking on, the next step to taking on the backlog is the act of choosing the game. Depending on your library size, this can be the easiest or the hardest thing to do. I'm willing to bet one of the reasons you have a backlog is that you couldn't choose which game to play in your library when a gaming session comes. That decision fatigue leads you to play what you deem as your go-to game, or become so drained that you don't want to play games at all. Again, this is me defaulting to Splatoon 3 when I have trouble choosing which game to play.
I could be playing all these games, but those damn cephalopods are just calling my name!
Which is why I'm going to heavily recommend a bit of genre mixing in the games you play. We all have our preferred game genres, and our taste makes us all unique as humans. But please, for the love of God, play different genres, even just a little. Because if your backlog consists of the same genre, they're all going to blend together and feel the same, even if each game in the genre has their different mechanics that make them unique. Your brain is probably going to throw a tantrum and crave something new. Please tend to this need as soon as possible so you don't get burned out on even games that you like. Does genre mixing risk compounding the backlog even further? Probably, but at least it'll allow you to be more willing to play other types of games. And you don't even need to add them to the backlog either. Just dabble into it even a little just to give it a try.
Alright, I had my fun to Red Dead Redemption 2 today. That is my not terribly deep out for today. Now to get back to it with Soul Hackers 2!
Now that the act of selecting the game is in order, the common question to ask yourself then becomes, how much of the game that you want to finish? Do you just want to complete the main content and select content that you care about, or do you want to go for 100% completion? HowLongToBeat.com does give different amounts based on your situation, so pick the one you see fit. Just a quick warning for those that are going for 100% completion, that is the one that's going to take you the most time. Should you choose to go for it, you're going to need a lot of time, probably a guide, and quite frankly, a lot of mental fortitude. I have completed Tales of Symphonia 11 times in my life and still haven't achieved 100% completion. I owned Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube for over 20 years and I still haven't achieved 100% completion. Those A ranks require a lot of patience.
Now you know how straight A students getting B's feel.
If the backlog is still giving you woes because it's grown to the point where it's uncontrollable, the next solution is probably the simplest of all. Stop buying new games! The logic here is that if you stop buying new games, there's no new games to put on the backlog, and you'll be more focused on the games you currently have on the backlog. This also has a side benefit for appreciating the games you have at the moment, so you'll be able to love them more. With a solution like that, the backlog roads are going away, right?
Easier said than done!
A solution that simple has got to have some caveats. Sure, never buying games will prevent you from building up the backlog further, though there are several factors that test that restraint. All of which I'm going to repeat myself on because I went over them minutes earlier. They're both the reason why the backlog is here and why stopping is more difficult than you might think. First off, I already did talk about those darn sales. Gaming is expensive, which is why people turn to sales to get a good deal out of these games. Opportunities like that do not appear often, so if it's a game that you're interested in and want to play it eventually and the sale price is something you can easily do, just get it. Nobody will judge you for taking that sale that might never happen again. Secondly, there is always a new game coming out being announced. It's entirely possible that there is a game that you are interested in that's coming out as I am saying this sentence. If you are hyped for a game enough that you want to play it on day one, you likely suffer from FOMO or fear of missing out, and it's more common than you might think. It's going to add to your backlog, which might feel stressful, but playing the game that you're hyped for the day it launches feels awesome. So what feeling is going to prevail at the end of the day?
If you got nothing from either scenario, consider yourself lucky.
Of course, if never buying games ever again isn't doing it for you, there is one final solution to taming that backlog, though it's less of a solution and more of a change of mindset. If all else fails, acceptance might be the only option left. With all the games out there in the world, I think we're just gonna have to accept the fact that we're never going to beat every game out there. It's just not humanly possible. I mean, you can try if you're willing to give up all eating, sleeping, and socializing, and even then, you can't ever play every game out there, let alone every good game out there. And that's assuming that you have a taste for every game out there, which is also not humanly possible. There are people that still participate in console wars for some reason. You think there is a single human being out there that will like every game imaginable? Sure, there are people that want to try new experiences, but for the most part, each individual has their own taste and will tend to prioritize them. I might like what I played of The Last of Us, but I'm not going to devote my life to the game like I do with the Tales series.
And that is a lot of devotion.
So is there an end-all be-all method for taking on the backlog? Well, different people will give you different answers to that question, but to me, there is no general answer to that question. What I think of the issue of taking on the backlog is that it's all about how you view them. It's all in the mindset. When the term backlog comes up, the first thing that comes to mind is a queue of assignments, projects, and tasks that have yet to be completed. This might risk turning hobbies that contain backlogs into a job, and that can eventually become no fun. Gaming is a wonderful hobby to be a part of, but dedicating every waking moment of it can get tiring, even to the most hardcore gamer. Just like everything ever, overexposure causes one to get tired of the thing they're exposed to, even if it's a hobby that they love. And if you're trying to complete a backlog for the sake of completing a backlog, it has a chance on wearing on you. And if left unchecked, it could lead to burnout, and that love for that hobby could fade. And gaming is not immune from this. Life happens, I get it, but do you really want to make the thing that's supposed to free you from the stresses of life become another part of the stresses of life? In my opinion, it's better to think of the backlog less like a task list and more of a playlist. Think of each game like an experience rather than just another thing to get done. The backlog was made with games that you as an individual chose, meaning that you did curate the list of games like you would your personal songs playlist. That way, you can pretty much figure out the games that you do like and remove the ones that you don't. That backlog won't feel so scary if there is something to look forward to when you do decide to sit down and game. When you think of it like that, you avoid feeling you're completing a game just for the sake of completing the game. You play the game with enthusiasm going in and come out of that session with an overall positive experience. Or a lesson learned if it didn't excite you. And if you do decide to see a game through to the end, it's a great feeling once you do make it, but you might end up liking a game more if you enjoy the journey to get there. And who knows, if that experience was rough, there is a small victory of making it through to the end. Completing a single game can be a long and arduous road, but having an overall positive experience in the journey makes taking it on easier and leaves you more likely to be satisfied in the end. And when one game closes, another one opens up, ready for you to take it on and experience it yourself. If it's something to look forward to, that large backlog becomes less intimidating to look at, because it's a reminder that's full of the things that bring you joy and makes you, you.
I think the lesson here is that there is no true way to take on a gaming backlog, let alone how we should view them. It could be the best thing or the worst thing to have. It's all about how you as a person would want to view it. But overall, maybe we shouldn't worry about the backlog to the point where it causes us stress. Yes, completing the game is a good feeling, but is it really if you didn't like the journey to begin with? If anything, if the backlog is filled with games that you end up loving, it might not be such a waste of time at all. Even though there are exceptions. As for me, I think I'll learn to love having a backlog of games if I think of them as varying opportunities. I swear, this was smaller a few minutes ago. But no matter, I will take on my backlog with enthusiasm and I will see it through to the end even if it kills me, which is why I am going to get back into Tears of the Kingdom tomorrow. I really want to get started on new games, Another Code and Rain Code, and I do want to get started on either one of these two things. But then there's the whole contributing to the human race thing that I have to do.
Several minutes of indecisiveness later, for f***'s sake, I came back from vacation to this, just play Tears of the Kingdom already!
Tears of the Kingdom it is then!